स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे.
All right. So, well, there's nothing much to say about myself, but what the topic I think that I was going to share with you some thoughts today was Ramakrishna of the heart. That's the topic. I had written about it and spoken about it a while ago. And then some of you felt that that may be a topic of interest. So when I wrote and spoke about Ramakrishna of the heart, what I had in mind that when we adore some divine personality, we worship them, we meditate on them, we pray to them, how we are connected with them, how we see them, what is our relationship to them is very important. Now, many of us here, I imagine, of course, we are all familiar with Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. Many of our lives are shaped and inspired by the glowing examples they set before us. So one of the questions that becomes very important is that the deity we worship or the personality we adore, who is that person? And some of us who have been students of Ramakrishna's life may find this question just frivolous. It's like, who is Ramakrishna? And you say, well, of course we know who Ramakrishna is. Many of the Vedanta societies are named as the Ramakrishna Vedanta Society. The one in North Carolina itself also has the name Ramakrishna before it. So who is Ramakrishna would seem to be not a very serious question, but actually it is, because every personality lives in at least two dimensions. There is a historical dimension, and then there is a spiritual dimension. Now, when we speak about history, we are dwelling in the sphere of time, the dimension of time. And when we speak about time, invariably, we're speaking about past, present, and future. So if someone were to come to you and say, oh, I want to know about Ramakrishna, what would you do? And I guess the first thing that many of us might do is suggest some book. Oh, read this book. Read this life of Ramakrishna, and then you will know about him. But when we read Sri Ramakrishna's life, when we read his book, we know about a person who lived more than 100 years ago in Bengal, born in a village called Kamarpukur, his childhood there, then he comes to Calcutta, then starts worshipping in the temple built by Rani Rasmani. And then he has this insatiable hunger to pray to God, and then all the spiritual practices, and then how increasingly people begin to see that he was not merely an ordinary human being, that he was not just a human being who had acquired a divine stature, but that very possibly was a divine being who had come down in a human form. And so this journey of Ramakrishna, starting with the priest in the Kali temple and so on, all of us are familiar with that story. We also know how afterwards all these young men led by Narendranath, they came and formed the first generation of the Ramakrishna movement, and how the whole movement has spread now today all over the world. And yet, even when we read this life and it tells us about him, we get a kind of education about who this person was. He's still a little bit disconnected from us. He's still separated by us by time. Clearly, more than 100 years separate him from us, and space as well. Some of us may have visited Calcutta or Kamarpukur and Jairambati, but they were just kind of short visits. Where we are permanently located, that space is even geographically far from where Ramakrishna was. And so Ramakrishna of the past, the Ramakrishna that we learn about from books, yeah, is useful, but that benefit we get from that can be still quite limited. Then the next thing that we can do is how to bring that Ramakrishna of the past into the present. And one of the ways we can do that is when we, for instance, when you read the Gospel of Ramakrishna, and then you have the description in it saying, oh, this is what happened in 1882, M went to Dakshineshwar, and we have all this wonderful description. But again, when we read the Gospel, it just feels as if we are reading about what happened 100 years ago to those fortunate few who were there that time. And then sometimes we might feel, oh, but I never got a chance to see Ramakrishna. I was not in Dakshineshwar at that time. Now, of course, if you believe in rebirth, you can say, well, maybe in my last life, last birth, I was there and I did see him. But of course, since you don't remember it, it's no consolation. And so how to then bring that Ramakrishna of the past into the present? And one way of doing that is to put ourselves into those conversations. For instance, now, when you read in the Kathamrita that there is a description that M visits Dakshineshwar, he enters Thakur's room, and Sri Ramakrishna is sitting there on his bed, and Narendra, Rakhal, Paltu, all of them are sitting around. Now, when you read that, and when Sri Ramakrishna starts speaking with those devotees, instead of thinking that this is what he is telling those people, if I can say, no, he's telling that to me, that along with Narendra, Rakhal, and then put your own name there, I am also sitting there. Then it becomes very personal. Then you have brought the Ramakrishna of the past into the present. You see, I think some of you who, I was very fascinated by it some years ago when I visited Italy and some other churches in Rome and Florence. Amazing, and I'm sure many of you would have done that as well. So one of the fascinating things I found, and I took a tour, a guided tour of many of the important churches there. And so the guide was telling me, so, there are these magnificent paintings and some sculptures as well along the walls of these big churches. And then the guide would point out that here's Jesus, and then the road and the people, and someone from among that crowd, the guide would say, that is the donor. So all of these paintings and all of the sculptures somebody had to pay for it. And usually it was the wealthy people of those periods who paid and commissioned these paintings. Now, one of the things they always did was the one who was paying for the painting would tell the painter that in that crowd which is surrounding Jesus, put me there. Now, it's just seeing yourself there in that moment. Suddenly, you are no longer thinking about what happened 2000 years ago. It suddenly becomes, yes, I was there. He's speaking with me. He's telling me those things. So similarly, when you read the Gospel of Ramakrishna, instead of saying, this is what Thakur told Narendra, you can say, well, I was also there in that room. I heard it. He's telling me. So when you personalize the teaching, then Ramakrishna of the past then comes into the present. That is one very powerful way of removing the distance that separates us, the distance of time and the distance of space that separates us from Ramakrishna. Another thing that we can see also is how, as a result of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, the inspiration of his life, how lives are getting changed, how our own life is changed. If we look at our own life and see how was I as a person before I came to know about Ramakrishna, and how have I changed as a result of knowing about him, trying in my own way. We may not have succeeded fully. Our attempts might be very imperfect, but nevertheless, being inspired by their lives, things have changed within us. So when we notice the change that has occurred within us, that makes the presence of Ramakrishna in our life even more real. When we see the transformative power of his life. And then looking externally, we can see how his teachings have changed society, how not just a handful of individuals, but how organizations, and of course, the Ramakrishna Order, the Ramakrishna Mission, the Math, the Vedanta Societies in the West, the central inspiration behind the work, the amazing work with just a handful of people, monks and devotees and nuns. The number is very small, but the amount of work that has been accomplished in the last 100 years is amazing. So when you see how Ramakrishna's life and teachings have actually brought about a very tangible change, a tangible transformation in the society, then the Ramakrishna of the past comes into the present. But is it possible to bring him even closer to us? Is it possible to bring him even closer to us? And that can happen only in meditation. So you see, it begins with Ramakrishna of the books, Ramakrishna of history, and then seeing the changes Ramakrishna has brought about in our own life, putting ourselves in the text, as I've said, and so on, we will be able to bridge that gap a little bit. But if you want to eliminate that gap fully, bring Ramakrishna not just in the present, but right now, that can happen in meditation. And therefore, those of us who meditate on Ramakrishna, for instance, as our Ishta, we have to ask ourselves that the one I meditate on, the one I try to visualize in my heart, who is that one? In fact, this was a question that was asked. This is not a new question. This question was asked even in the Vedas. All the offerings they did in the Homakunda, in the fire worship, they asked this question. You see all these very traditional Vedic homas, etc. Indraya Swaha, Varunaya Swaha, and so on. It'll go on. So the question was, who are these divinities to whom we are offering these oblations? The Vedic word goes this way: Kasmai Devaya Havisha Vidhema. Who is this Deva to whom we are making all these offerings? And that is the question that you and I can ask as well. Who is this Deva? We say Ramakrishna Dev, or we say Thakur, or Sri Ramakrishna. Who is this person whom I'm trying to visualize in my heart? Who do I see when I close my eyes and try to meditate? Who am I seeing? And most of us might say, well, in the beginning, we just see darkness. We're not really seeing anybody. It's a little bit like when Shashi Maharaj, Swami Ramakrishnananda first visited Dakshineshwar. And as Thakur often did, one of the first questions he asked Shashi Maharaj, he was not Ramakrishnananda then, of course, asked him, Thakur asked him, which um, which kind of God do you believe in, or who do you worship? God with form or without form? And that was a question he often asked to many of the visitors. And his first answer was, as youngsters, he was a teenager, and I think the responses from youngsters are often very more honest, and sometimes might appear to be blunt than adults. Sometimes when we become a little older, we start calculating a lot. Oh, if I say this, would this appear offensive? Or what will this person think? Let me say something which is right. We start calculating all of these things. But when you are very young, you just say what you feel like. And Thakur appreciated that kind of honesty. So when he asked Shashi, he said, do you believe in God with form or without form? Then Shashi said, right now, I don't even know whether there is God or not, whether God exists or not. My immediate problem is not whether he's with form or without form. My immediate problem is whether God even exists. So we have to be very careful about when we meditate and when we try to visualize, we say, who am I trying to visualize? And clearly, as I said, in the beginning, it's just darkness. And yet we are told again and again, well, God is dwelling in the heart. Your Ishta is sitting in the heart. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, if my Ishta is in my heart, why don't I see my Ishta? Why do I just see darkness? And why do I have to imagine my Ishta there? If my Ishta is actually there, I should be seeing my Ishta there. And there are two kinds of imaginations in Vedanta. That is imagining the imaginary and imagining the real. So if God were not present in my heart at all, and no amount of my imagining God there, nothing is going to happen, because that will be imagining the imaginary. But we are told again and again and again, no, God is present in the heart. My chosen deity, my Ishta, or those who meditate on Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna is there in my heart. Now, if we have Shraddha in that teaching, then we might say, oh, I'm just right now, if I close my eyes, I'm just seeing darkness. But I know I have faith that he is there. Now, if he's there and I don't see him, that means not that he is not there, it's that something is wrong with my eyesight. In fact, in North India, even now in the Sadhu Samaj, among all the monastics there, the Hindi speaking things, so when two sadhus meet, sometimes they'll ask one another, Kya drishti saaf hai? Which really means, can you see clearly? Now, they are not, of course, asking about how good your eyesight is. The idea is, can you see things? In other words, if my eyes are working well, then I will see things as they are. But if I don't see things as they are, there's something wrong with my eyesight. And so if I close my eyes and if I just see darkness here, that is because my eyesight isn't good, hasn't become good enough. And in fact, one of our Swamis, his name was Swami Vireswarananda. So he used to say, and I saw him when I joined the monastery in the 70s. He was there in the ashrama. And so one of the things he said, I still remember. So he said, when people have eye trouble, then they'll go to the doctor. And oftentimes the doctor will give them eye drops. And he says, when the eye drops, when you drop, and then the problem is solved. And so he just kind of was playing on words. This eye is an eye, and then I. So he says, so a spiritual problem, the obstacle in spiritual life, it is a kind of an I problem. And this I, the ego, has to drop. And only when the ego drops, is because of the ego that there is darkness and I don't see. Now, sooner or later, all devotees who, once they start meditating, in the beginning, as I said, there will be darkness, but then there will be days, there will be occasions when that darkness seems to go away, even if for a very short time. And then one sees one's Ishta there. Now, the advantage about for Ramakrishna worshippers especially is that because it's historically closer to us, um, and thanks to technology, it was not Thakur's time. There was no Zoom like this. Otherwise, he could have met many more people other than this handful who came to Dakshineshwar. But at least there was photography, and so we are fortunate that not too many, but we have 3 or 4 photographs of his still available. And so because his photographs are available, it is a little bit easier for us to visualize how he looked. Because sometimes if you try to visualize how Krishna looked or Rama looked, then you just have to think about some paintings, or if it's or maybe if you have seen too much of TV Mahabharat, then the person who acted as Krishna's role, your Krishna might appear in the same way as what you saw. Now, in Ramakrishna's case, of course, we don't have to use any of these gimmicks because Ramakrishna's picture itself is available. And the problem is, when we try to visualize Ramakrishna, it's very important that we don't visualize his photograph. Or if there is a certain image, like when you go to Belur Math, you have this beautiful marble image. So don't try to visualize a marble image or a photograph, because we want to realize God. We want to realize the real living Ramakrishna. We don't want to realize the photograph. We don't want to realize the murti. There is a difference. It's like the picture of a mango. Now, if a picture of a mango can remind you of a real mango, but you cannot eat the picture. If you want to eat it, you would need to go and get a real mango. And so that's the difference between a picture of Ramakrishna and the real Ramakrishna. So when we try to therefore visualize Ramakrishna in the heart, we have to visualize him as real, living, not a photograph, not a murti. And when we keep on doing that, and that's what I meant earlier when I said, it's not imagining the imaginary, it's imagining the real. In the beginning, it could be a very creative imagination, but imagining something or someone who is actually there. And then suddenly the door opens a little bit, and then you get a glimpse. It could be for a fraction of a second, it could be just 1 second or 2 seconds. But even that briefest of glimpses can fill the heart with so much joy, can fill the heart with such energy. And then maybe that you don't see it again. Maybe some few days pass, a few weeks pass. Then it's very frustrating. It's like, oh, I just saw it, but then I want it to come again. And then you need a lot of patience. You keep on day after day after day, doing your prayer, doing your japa, doing your meditation. And then suddenly it just opens up once again. And so as time passes, the frequency with which it will open will increase. You will see the form, the real living Ramakrishna more and more and more. And the duration also increases. Now, when that happens, that moment when you are actually perceiving the object of your meditation, time comes to a stop. As long as you feel, oh, now, when am I going to see? I want to see. You're not going to see it. Because that I want to see, as long as that I is there, that itself is a problem. At some point, you just have to be. You are not trying to do anything. You just are there, present, alert. And then at the most unexpected time, in a most unexpected way, suddenly the door will open. One other thing that is often said is that when you see that, don't get overjoyed. Don't start enjoying that. Because the problem is this: once you have a vision, and then you're like, oh, I had a vision, I'm feeling so good, and then it disappears. Because again, you have created that distance between yourself and the vision by saying you started enjoying it. It's in fact considered one of the obstacles in meditation. It's called rasa aswadanam. Rasa means the taste. You're trying to then enjoy that taste of having a divine vision, and then the meditation comes to an end. So enjoy it after your meditation is over, not while you're meditating. Now, I say all this because this Ramakrishna that we encounter in the depth of our heart, that is the real Ramakrishna. So the Ramakrishna of the history, the Ramakrishna we meet in books, and then the Ramakrishna that we see gradually changing and transforming our lives, transforming the society around us, the community around us, comes closer and closer and closer. But the closest, the goal of spiritual life would be to make the divine very real in our lives. And in order for that divine to become real, our spiritual quest will have to be real. For instance, now, and we have to ask this question to our own selves. We have to ask ourselves, what do I want in life? And very likely, there may not be just one answer to that question. We might have a list of things we want in life. And if you can keep that mental list, that's fine. If it helps you, you can just make a list. Actually, take a paper and pen, or nowadays, of course, you use your computer or your tablet or your phone and open it and say, these are the things I want in life. And you don't have to show that list to anybody. So you can be totally frank about it, because nobody's going to ask you to show that list. Now, once you make that list, then try to ask yourself, can I put this list in order of priority? That which are the things I want most? Which are the second most thing, the third most thing that I want? See if you can reorder those things according to how badly you want it. And then see where exactly God realization or self-realization or moksha comes in that list. Because sometimes I have seen people complain, is like, oh, kichoi holo na, kuch bhi nahi hua, itne saal se hum kar rahe hain, nothing happened. Nothing happened, but did you want it? Were you really hungry for it? On that list, where exactly was this, whatever was going to happen, where on that list was that thing mentioned? That is very important to see. And then if we are serious about spiritual life, then don't look at that list for a few days. And then after a few days, when you have some free time, open that list again. And then take those things one by one and ask yourself, do I really need this? What would happen if I don't get it? It's clearly, if most of us are realistic enough to know that we are not going to get everything that we want in life. Now, when we are very young, when we are little, we think nothing is impossible. And then as we grow older, we gradually come to see, no, some things are impossible. And then as we grow older, we say, wow, and then one by one, we say, okay, I wanted this thing, but this didn't happen, and so on. And some things will have happened as we wanted them. So the next thing would be to see if there is some of those, that list, if I can make that list shorter and shorter and shorter. Or at the very least, find that God realization, spiritual realization, enlightenment goes as high up on the list as possible. Now, when the day will come when the spiritual life becomes number one on that list, and everything other than that, I'm not saying the list has to become zero or anything, that you can still have that list, but somehow over time, the spiritual goal becomes number one on that list. And everything other than that, if you are truly prepared to say, well, if it happens, great. Even if it doesn't happen, Ramericha, Rama's will, whatever the Lord wills. Again, everybody says that. Do I really mean it? Because I've heard again many people say, oh, it's all Thakur has done, all Mother has done. And sometimes when we keep on saying these things too often, that just becomes another ritual. It's a little bit like thank you and good morning that we keep on saying all the time. When I was growing up in India, and I imagine many of us here grew up in India in our early part of our life, there wasn't much, it's not so much a part of the culture there to keep on saying thank you all the time. But that doesn't mean that there is no place for gratitude there. And so the feeling grateful or gratitude is there, but we might express it in different ways. Now, of course, when you come, and now today, of course, saying thank you has become so common. But because it has become so common and so frequent, we just say it without always feeling it. So, it's like say thank you. So when I say thank you, do I really feel my heart is filled with gratitude for what you have done? No, it's just a part of a social ritual. Or when I wish someone good morning or good day, we are to be saying like, oh, I really wish that you have a good morning. It's not like that. It's just good morning. So that kind of a ritual can occur. And in spiritual life, in religious life, when people say, oh, it's all Mother's will, it's all Ramakrishna is doing, that can become another social ritual without really meaning it in our heart. And so if I don't truly feel that way, that everything is happening through Mother's will, it's better that we don't even say it. But just to be honest, you just say, no, my will, I'm doing things according to my will. What we can pray for is, since I'm doing everything according to my will anyway, the least we can pray for is that Thakur, Mother, please make my will as close to your will as possible. Because that is the best we can do. Because ultimately, what will happen according to their will, everything is going to happen according to their will anyway. And we don't know what is going to happen. But we have our own little will. So we at least pray that my will be as close to theirs as possible. That is the better prayer than simply just saying, oh, no, whatever you want, Mother, like that doesn't, I don't think that's oftentimes very honest way of doing it. In any case, if that list that I spoke about, if and when the spiritual goal that becomes topmost on that list, everything else other than that becomes less and less consequential, then we can say the time has come to truly encounter Ramakrishna of the heart. Sri Ramakrishna says, when the sun is about to rise, the whole eastern direction, the horizon, suddenly becomes all the hue of color. Sun has not risen yet, but you can already see the eastern horizon changing the color, and you know the sun is about to rise. So similarly, in our case also, when it's time, when we are getting closer and closer to the divine being, we are getting closer and closer to our spiritual goal, we will begin to notice the change within us. And people around us will notice it as well. And then we know that the sun is about. So that is when the Ramakrishna of the heart will be revealed to us. So whenever we pray, we meditate, we worship, again, although today I've been speaking mostly about Ramakrishna, everything that I said would apply no matter what the focus of our spiritual life is. So everything is applicable to any particular form of the divine, any saint, any prophet that we worship. The idea is to make it very real. So if someone were to ask me, what is your goal in life? Apart from whatever answer you might give to that person, you should ask that question to yourself and say, what is the goal of my life? In fact, there is a book called the Vedanta Sara, written by one Sadananda. It's, I think, probably 17th century, I think. So he says one of the requirements in spiritual life is called mumukshutva, the longing for liberation. What Sri Ramakrishna says, that intense longing, in Bengali, he used to call it Vyakulata. So how do we know when that longing is intense? And so this book, Vedanta Sara, gives this beautiful expression. He says, Deepta Shira Jalarashim Iva. What is the intensity required to realize God? And it is said, when a person's head is on fire, what will that person want most? Just as that person will go here and there running just for water to put out that fire, that intensity is needed before we have the vision of God, before we realize God. If that person whose head is on fire, you say, oh, what's the hurry? Just have a little rasgulla and jalebi and then you can go. That will say, I don't want anything. I just want first water, nothing else. So that kind of intensity, it should come in our life. And Sri Ramakrishna says that we cry for so many things in life. How many people can cry for God? Now that cry has to be a very natural cry. It can't be artificially generated. I think there is in the Leela Prasanga, Ramakrishna, the great master, the book by Swami Sarvagatananda, biography of Sri Ramakrishna. In one place, he mentions in that book how when people cry, tears either come from the inner corner of the eyes or the outer corner. And I forget now which stands for what, but one of these, he said, if we cry for worldly things, tears will come from one side. If we cry for God, the tears will come from the other corner, other end. But which one I don't remember now. So we had this one devotee in Chennai when I was there. And so she is a very long-standing devotee. So one morning she came and told Swamiji who was there, she said, Maharaj, yesterday when I was doing japa, suddenly tears started coming. I immediately got up to see in the mirror from which side the tears were coming. Now you don't need to go to a mirror. You know why those tears are coming. So again, it's not about looking at these kind of external verifications of what is happening. Deep down in our heart, every one of us knows that you see, nowadays, thanks to this pandemic, everyone says, put on a mask, put the mask, don't go anywhere without a mask. And that's true. And we all really should practice it very, very, very carefully. We have to do that until this goes away. But spiritually speaking, it's good to know that we already have a lot of masks. But those masks will not prevent us from getting the virus. So we need an external mask as well. But in order to go and meet the divine, meet God directly, we'll have to remove all the masks. When we go about in society, when you're meeting other people, we try to be our best selves. But deep down, we don't have to go and wash our dirty laundry in public. We don't have to tell everybody everything that is going on in our mind. That's okay. But deep down, every one of us knows what's going on inside. And so we have to clear that mess which is inside in order for us to meet the Ramakrishna of the heart. So these are some of the thoughts I wanted to share with you today about making our spiritual life very real. Because it's only something that is real that will nourish us. It's like somebody just gives you an empty plate and says, eat these mangoes, lots of apples and eat it. He said, well, I don't see anything there. He said, no, just imagine it's there and eat it. Well, if you just imagining they are there, then the nourishment also will be imaginary. And then nothing. That will not help you at all. So spiritual life is not about imagination. It's about dealing with real entities. And so some of the thoughts that I wanted to share with you today was about how to make Ramakrishna real. Not simply keep him confined to books, not simply keep him confined to certain ideas, not to reduce him to just a few kind of social rituals, but to make him very real. And that little bit of reality, when it gets awakened in our own heart, our whole life will change. Our whole life will be transformed. That's the idea. So now I think I have spoken enough. But if you have any ideas, thoughts, comments, questions, feel free to ask.
Should not we enjoy that?
No, you can enjoy. All that I'm saying is, the moment you start enjoying, the vision has stopped. If you want the vision to continue, then don't enjoy it right away.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
thing is this.
So
The thing is this. No. When you are having a vision, you're already enjoying it. But when I say don't enjoy it, means don't acknowledge that enjoyment. The moment you say, I am so lucky, I am so happy, your ego is coming up again.
I understand that.
Ego comes, then again it goes away. That's what I meant by saying, don't bring that ego into the picture.
And by the way, the tears of spirituality come from the side of the eyes, and the world is the one that comes. I have learned that, and I don't have any tears either kind. Doesn't matter. Thank you, Swami. Thank you.
Any other ideas all of you have?
Vinod has a question.
Swamiji, can I ask you something that when Swamiji, this is Shikha asking you a question.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah.
Swamiji, when we see something in my dreams, we just witness it. And then after we wake up, we feel sort of very joyous and happy. But then the urge constantly goes on that when can I see when I'm awake, not only on my dreams. So that, because the dreams is not real, it is just the subconscious mind in my dream. But when people have seen vision when they are awake, is that real?
Well, first of all, I think seeing Thakur in dream also is quite a great thing. So don't belittle that. Because what we are seeing in dream is the samskaras getting activated, so in the mind. So some samskaras connected with Ramakrishna word are in your mind, which is why you are even seeing it in a dream. So don't think that seeing it in a dream is not real, because I mean, you're seeing it now also. It's as real as it is seeing in the dream, and that's one of the things that Vedanta says, that seeing the Jagrat and Swapna are not very different. That is first thing. Second thing is, it's not just about seeing Ramakrishna, because a lot of people feel, oh, I have seen, I had dreamt of this, I saw this, I saw Krishna, I saw Rama, I saw Shiva. I mean, you just feel good about it. But ultimately, what sound is coming? Okay. Ultimately, what will make it matters is how much, whether it has changed me in some way, whether it has made me a better person in some way. Because sometimes we might see a lot of things, but my daily life and my inner life is pretty much same. Nothing has changed. So then you say, well, what's the point then? So while seeing in dream or whenever is a good sign, we can feel happy about it, we can feel encouraged about it. But ultimately, what will matter is how much it has changed me as a person. And it is good to feel that vyakulata, that if you see Thakur in a dream, oh, why I would like to see Thakur even more often in my dream. And if he comes more and more often in my dream, maybe someday he'll come in my waking state also. So keep on longing. That longing is good. That longing is important.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Shamiji.
Maharaj, I had a comment. A couple of weeks ago, I saw this video about a kid who is trying to sing along with the Cookie Monster. And the kid is so distracted. Every time a specific letter comes in the letters, the girl is overjoyed and sees Cookie Monster is beside her and then just keeps on saying Cookie Monster. And then it kept me, I kept thinking about it for last 2 weeks. How much joy would I get if I am able to think about Thakur in that way throughout the day? I'm not intentionally trying to think, but if or when I am able to think about Thakur at random times of the day, would I get as much joy? If not, at least I should feel joy that I am able to think about Thakur, and that would give me more joy in the future.
Absolutely. I think people who are in love know about this. When they fall in love, they think about their object of love no matter what you're doing. It happens very naturally. You don't have to force yourself to do it. You don't have to say, oh, somehow I must remember that. So remembering Thakur throughout the day is really kind of falling in love with Thakur. And if you kind of love, that real love comes, then naturally remembering Thakur is then, in fact, forgetting Thakur becomes a problem. You won't be able to forget him. See, that's the thing. Yeah. Any other ideas, comments, questions? Just pray to Ramakrishna. He is the one who blesses me, and he is the one who blesses everybody.
Today, if you say so, it will be happen so. So.
No, don't. This is a very easy way out. Don't depend on my saying it. The more important thing is, I must say it to myself, because no amount of anybody else saying it. There is a Bengali song which Sri Ramakrishna used to sometime narrate, which said something like, "Ami diyechi montor ekhon montor." It's actually a pun on the word mantra. So mantra in Bengali is it's kind of a poetic colloquial montor, and montor means your mind. So I've given you this mantra, and now your mind has to deal with it. So essentially what we need is the blessing of our own mind. Right now, our mind is kind of having a mind of its own. So we'll have to bring up, just like, how many of you have pets at home? Do any of you have pets? Nobody? Nobody has a dog or a cat or anything? No. Oh, so those who have pets, they know. Especially if you get somebody from a rescue or something, then it may be the dog is already trained or something. But if you get a small little puppy, you know how much training is required, because a dog pet who is not trained can be a big headache. But a well-trained pet can bring so much joy. Our mind is like a pet and has not been trained for a long time. And now suddenly we find we have to live with this mind all the time. So we need lot of patience, lot of perseverance to train this mind. And once the mind becomes trained, once the mind does what I want it to do, that is such a great joy. Then we'll say, wow, my mind, in short, when you're saying about blessing, I say all this to show that we need our own mind's blessing first. And in order for our mind to become a blessing, we need to practice discipline. So I greatly appreciate what you said, and I pray that through Thakur and Ma's grace, may all of us make progress in our spiritual lives. May our hearts be filled with grace, strength, love, and fulfillment. So my best wishes to all of you. Stay safe, stay happy, and try to meet the real Ramakrishna in your life. We will all try to do that.
स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे